Folks, welcome to the BSC podcast. Zach and myself are here with Dr. Scott Weiss from New York. Dr. Scott is world-renowned doctor, an author, and many, many more things. So, Doc, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, guys. Truly. I mean, Jim, we've spoken a couple times. Zach, I don't know you that well, but I'm excited to be here. I've seen what you guys have done, and it's amazing that I'm a guest.
Thank you. It's awesome to have you on. We've been looking forward to it. I just wish we could get you in the actual studio as opposed to the Zoom, but hey, this will work.
This is what technology has come to these days, right?
Exactly.
Oh, we'll
Exactly.
have you in the studio one of these days, Doc. One of these
Yeah.
days.
I'd love it, and that's when we can actually do more physical demonstrations and the things that we might talk about today, we can actually put into real action.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. So, Doc, let's go back to the start. Give us a little bit in your background, where you grew up and how you got to this point, and then we'll merge into costs and so on.
Sure, I'll start born in Brooklyn, New York, raised there most of my life. Parents realized Brooklyn was getting a little out of hand, moved to Queens, thinking a little bit more east would be better. From Queens, moved out to Long Island, and then now reside in Manhattan full time and love it here. But, the early days of Brooklyn and Queens really shaped the martial arts life that we're talking about here. And, of course, I could expand on that.
Okay, let's talk about that. So, you started with martial arts and then you merged into boxing, or vice versa?
So I started in boxing. I would say like the first time I heard of any pugilistic arts was through boxing. I had an uncle, Sammy, and I would love whenever I went to one of our like holiday parties, family get-togethers, if Uncle Sammy was there, I was either doing pull-ups on his bicep, I was trying to arm wrestle him. He was always just this swarthy, cool guy doing magic tricks as well. He was just like a man of all trades. So I think the first time I ever heard of like boxing or fighting or oh, Uncle Sammy's coming was in my like 3, 4, 5 year old age. That's the first time I really ever knew there was something called a boxer or a fighter. And I would say, once I got to about 6, 7, because I was born in 1970. So about 6 or 7 years old, my dad took me to see Rocky, and it was all over. I came home, guys. I started wrapping my hands with toilet paper and running around all the buildings in Queens. And that's six, So I guess just to answer your question succinctly, it started with I heard a little bit about a family member, and then dad took me to Rocky, where it was one of those big billboards in Queens where it said Rocky won, Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire, gave all the people that were playing in it, Carl Weathers. And I would say that was the most influential thing that ever happened to me. And that was at about 6, 7. I think Rocky came out in 76 or 77, sometime when the Warriors came out, well, about the same time.
Oh, The Warriors. Now that's a good movie right there.
Yeah, well, that was another influential piece to my life growing up in New York in the 70s. But I remember there were similar times where the police weren't respected in New York. And I remember Cus, and we can go back to that. Like when Cus grew up, police weren't respected because they were new. In the 70s, weren't respected because they didn't have money. And I think that whole Rocky One 70s, definitely put me in the mindset to try to figure out what's a fighter, what's pugilism, like what's going on. And I definitely heard about boxing before martial arts.
So, so you heard about boxing before martial arts. Did you start boxing before martial arts, or boxing came later?
Boxing was my first start, and it was at a temple and a church. So that was like, parents throwing two kids together with big fat gloves on and just saying go. I didn't know what I was doing. There was nothing organized in my mind. I was just thrown against other kids, taller, shorter, fatter, skinnier than I was. So the competition or yeah, that piece started with boxing and then evolved to martial arts, Jim.
So what style of martial, or well, you started in boxing, so take us a little bit through that. So you were learning, for lack of a better way of putting it, generic boxing, like, just the usual jab, or did you start in the Cus method, or that was something you discovered later?
Oh, totally something I discovered later. The first style that was taught to me was like, Joe Louis's mindset, or Muhammad Ali's mindset. Had nothing to do with cuss and the peekaboo at that time. Um, and then you mentioned martial arts. After boxing and really doing miscellaneous, so to say, like people just put me there. It wasn't something that I loved or had a passion at that time. I started to say I wanted to win and I wanted to get good. And if I was going to do this, I remember like wanting to learn more. And I went to a judo instructor, maybe 8, 9 years old, and I started to love judo. And I learned that my shorter size was able to throw people way bigger than me. So I started to really appreciate judo. But then I took it really seriously in the 12-year-old age, and I studied Tang Sudo. And I got I studied that and Chuck Norris's John Natividad, and we could talk about that whole crew. But I studied that. That's when I became serious. And I
So
was like, I want to understand the forms. I want to really get my belt, my black belt. And I was lucky enough to get a second degree and an instructor degree in Tang Sudo. And that was my first actual, hands-on professional mindset. And I'm going to do this.
and who was your instructor in Tang Soo Do, and where was that dojo?
That was in Long Island, New York. And I really couldn't afford, or unfortunately, my parents wouldn't help me by going to the good school. So I went to um, a place called Tempo. It was like a youth center. And I luckily found a woman named Janet Moy who studied Tang Sudo at like the epicenter of where Tang Sudo was, but she was part of their lineage. And I studied with her at a youth center to start.
And did you go all the way in that system? Did you go from white to black, or was it something you trained in but you didn't rank in and you moved on, or how did that
No,
work?
that was my most serious style. I didn't progress any further than green belt in judo, but then once I studied Tang Sudo, I got right to black belt, 100%. And then again, I got my instructor and then second degree. So that was truly, again, going from a child mind and body and crossing over through puberty and mastering one style and understanding that Korean mastery of legs, but the beautiful Chinese aspect of the hands they had. And then they dabbled in everything else, which I started to get a bad taste with. But yes, Tang Soo Do was my first traditional black belt through their organization. Started in Long Island, and I think their main organization was in New Jersey somewhere under Huang Qi, who was the grandmaster.
So
James,
what
didn't we when we were interviewing Tony Graf and Anthony Graf and Tim Thackeray and Jason Hahn, I believe Tony Graf was from Long Island, wasn't he? Didn't he say he was from Long Island?
I believe so. Yes. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah, and he
believe.
was like a real high level Taekwondo athlete, traveled, trained for the Olympics and got in the Olympic Training Center and went really far into that.
What
Yeah.
year? What year was that? Because my
Oh,
goal was to be at the 1988 Olympics for Taekwondo in Seoul when it was a
yeah,
test
yeah.
event.
And that was let's see who that was Herb Perez, I believe. No,
Herb
92.
Perez. Yeah,
Yeah,
Herb Perez, I
92 I
know.
think was Herb Perez, I think. Or maybe it was
Definitely.
88. But
Yeah.
no, this would have been around the early 2000s. I want to say 2004, 2008,
Okay. Well,
and
then you got
2000.
your boys. Then you got your whole family that I know really well, the Lopez
Lopez
family.
Yeah,
family.
and we just had the Lopez's on. So and Tony and Steven used to battle it out like crazy, man. It was always those two head to head, always for the US team. So yeah, but when you said Long Island, I'm like, that kind of clicked. Like I think Tony's from Long Island.
Yeah,
This is
I
at
don't know that name, but being that I didn't get to the Olympics, so to say, through the front door through
Yeah.
Taekwondo, and I lost, one step before the trials at the Nationals.
Yeah.
I snuck in through the side door as a sports medicine professional, and I was so thankful meeting the Lopez family after Sydney, Australia. And those guys took me in. I would train with them, and
They're awesome.
they have no clue how thankful I am that even, that was my dream, and they
Yeah.
were living my dream, and they just were like, "Hey, kid, come along." And I have pictures. I wish I pulled it up, but I have pictures in Athens. I think it was Greece. I was their sports medicine doc and I took pictures with the whole family, and it was
You
such
should
a.
send those to us.
I will. I'll find them, and I will. Remind me, and I promise you, I will.
Isn't the Lopez family an interesting story? How Gene basically made them champions. Of course, we know they progressed, to training at, higher facilities and so on, but it basically started in a garage with his mother walking in with cups of tea to them.
Sugarland, Texas, baby.
Just goes to show you ambition, motivation, and drive.
Tenacity.
It was it was his name won't come to me right now, but I saw an interview with him. He's an old school bodybuilder, and they asked him in the 80s, with the bodybuilding, progressing, and the new or the fancier machines was all starting to start. And he said, look, you can get the results anywhere you want if you want to get the results.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could lift a mule like Milo from Crete, or you can lift a dumbbell. You know what I mean?
Or you
The
could go
muscle.
old school Rocky Four, be lifting that chariot that
You remember that? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I love about you guys, that you know exquisitely what I grew up on. I
Yeah.
mean, when I saw Drago doing all that shit, excuse me for cursing, I mean,
Oh, we
the
can curse. It's all
Russian,
good.
that combination of Russian and American, I mean, I would go home and try to mimic everything he did. I mean, when he did the Bruce Lee the Bruce Lee flags,
Oh
I'm
yeah, the
like, come
dragon
on.
flag.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
dragon
like,
flag.
what are you copying my boy Bruce?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well,
I
it's interesting. I asked Gene Lopez on our interview. I said, if you have one person you would pick, taking into account that they're coachable and have the ability, and we know he has the ability, and you could take him to national and all the way to Olympic level within 2 seconds. He said Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah. You said Van Damme. All four of them did.
All
All
four
four
of
of
them.
them.
But he responded. But I almost hadn't finished the question. He said Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, immediately.
Immediately. Yeah. So it's
well,
amazing that a lot of people look at these guys as just actors and so on, but they're not. There's a lot more behind. Usually they have something before they get where they got.
yeah, I mean, Jean-Claude with his leg, he reminds me of Superfoot with the opposite leg.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely. I
know,
always said that. Put them together, they make the best fighter in the world.
I've seen so many people do Van Damme's kicks, and I'll tell you here and now, there's a lot of good people that can kick faster, more powerful, as fast as, but nobody kicks as good as Van Damme.
Nobody kicks as pretty, man. It was
Well,
so aesthetically pleasing. So aesthetically pleasing. He had the whole package. He looked good. He had the body. He had the long legs, which makes it even more aesthetic. He was built for that.
Him and I were working out at Gold's Gym 20 years ago. Now, keep in mind, 20 years ago, he's 45. And there's a guy from France, and he asked him to throw a kick. Now, you think a side kick, round kick, hook kick. Van Damme said, I'll demonstrate it on James. He stood about 4 feet away from me with his feet together. He jumped up and spun around and did the 360, clean over my head. When I say clean, it was this much over my head.
Wow.
Nice.
His legs are so strong, and his glutes and lower back, the way he can propel himself, his legs were together. He was not in a stance. He was standing, put his bag down, said to the guy, take your phone out. Guy jumped, the guy took out his phone. He just, it was almost like levitating. He just went, boom. And
That's cool. The only thing I could say akin to what I was able to do at my peak is I could stand nose to nose with you, Jim, and do an inside-outside kick and knock a cigarette out of your hand.
that's
That
an
was,
ability.
yeah,
That's an ability. That doesn't
And
come easy either.
no,
Philip
but that
Reed,
was my trick. That was my
Philip
parlor
Reed
trick.
kicking the cigarette out. Philip Reed, when he did that in Best of the Best,
Yes.
that's good too. I saw a guy we had I think he passed away just a couple years ago, But when I was about 16, 17 at my school, we had a guy that came in from China and he was blind and he wanted to train while he was in town visiting his family. And so my instructor brought him in and we only knew the guy for like 3 months, but he wanted to do a demonstration to where he would cut an apple off of somebody's head with a samurai sword. He's blind, dude. And my instructor only knew him for 3 months and he let him do it. And he did it. He did it.
Wow.
And it's like I was always just blown away by that. How can he do that blind?
Well, Doc, there's a question. You've been a medical professional, and I mean, there is, you can explain this in a way that makes sense to people. When somebody's deaf and or blind, they have other senses that come into play, right?
They do. And what happens is those other senses become so much more heightened than everybody else's. And that's why we know there's more of an energetic field than people kind of like
People understand, like a
understand.
vibration. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when things like that happen, all I can truly say is it's not fully understood. And I don't think anybody could stand behind saying, I know 100% why this happens. But the senses of others, get heightened. Those that, if their sight is decreased, their touch, their smell, their hearing becomes so extraordinary that they're able to do certain feats like that.
Like his
Um,
kinesthetic awareness was just through the roof on everything. I mean,
Right, and we call that like kinesthetic awareness or
yeah,
proprioception, where your
yeah,
body is in space.
yeah.
Again, like blind people count naturally when they walk upstairs. I have
He would
patients that
know who was in the room. To me, that was what was crazy because I was young. I was 15, 16. He could tell who was in the room when he first walked in. It's like, how'd you know? He'd
smell,
be like, oh, hey, Zach. That's like,
smell and sound, smell
man,
and
that's
sound.
crazy.
It is. And again, that's what I think like whenever I hear stories about the monks that train those things, that knew of that way before we did, I find that stuff fascinating. But
Yeah.
again, we don't know enough science to really understand energetic energy and the way that all the senses kind of get heightened, but we know that that's a fact and there are a lot of people that have a reduction in certain senses that the other ones they're out of the off the charts.
Do you think that there truly is, like, I mean, you're kind of describing like a sixth sense almost, right? I mean, do you think that kind of truly exists, like a certain plane that we don't, we can't obviously can't prove, but it's there?
I mean, I could tell you by opinion, and I always like to say this is my opinion, and this is true evidence-based fact. We don't know any evidence-based fact, but yes, I do believe that there is an energetic force in each of us, and it can be higher or lower or brighter or dimmer. And I know that, and I think you guys know that because when you fight somebody, you can feel somebody coming at you with an energy, or you could feel when somebody is losing energy.
Yeah.
So I do
Yeah.
think there's something about that, but I'm not an expert in that, but I've experienced it, you
Well, I
know?
mean, even in the acting world, for example, okay, you can tell when somebody walks in the room and takes over. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
when somebody's on screen, you just, whoa, they don't even have to say a word. You can just feel it, right? I mean, that's kind of the same thing too, in a
And I
way.
don't even think there's one other level or a sixth. That there might be more,
Yeah, yeah.
because I feel like I would be so closed off to think there's just one more. There's probably so many other senses that we just don't know yet, and I look forward to being alive to being able to see what they figure out.
If anything, this is the era, right? I mean,
Yeah,
right now we're in it. We're gonna be possibly the first ones to see this kind of stuff. Like you think dolphins, they communicate telepathically, right? If they can do that, there has to be a way if we can figure that out, reverse engineer it, and figure that out of what's going on in other species. There has to be.
I agree to that stuff, and I look forward to that research.
Yeah.
So, Doc, going back to the martial arts. So you got second degree black belt in Tang Sudo, and then you trained with other people. Because I know at the very least you met an instructor of mine, Dan Inosanto. Did you train with Guru Dan, or did you just meet him, or did you take seminars, or how did that come about?
Oh, that's cool that you asked that. So yes, so Guru Dan I met through a guy named Nick Sakulas, who owns Progressive Martial Arts here in Long Island. A Greek guy who is awesome. I can't say enough good things about him. And he basically was the one that knew I was a great sports medicine physical therapist that had an affinity for martial arts. He invited us to a seminar one time, and Guru Dan had a back issue and almost couldn't come out and do the seminar. So I was able to go backstage, help him out, at least get him through the seminar, worked him through the break, and then after. So that's really when I was like, wait a second, did I just touch the guy that touched Bruce Lee? Did I just do that? And that was really it. But I'd never really worked with him. We did a Kali seminar. We talked for 2 days, 8, 9 hours a day, like throughout most of the time, but I never had the opportunity to work at, Nick's school and really train with him for months. So it was more like sharing of thoughts, ideas, the combination of what sports medicine and martial arts do, because you kind of, if you know the martial arts, you kind of know the healing arts. And that's what we were talking about. If you know how to heal a joint, you know how to break it. And that's what me and Guru Dan talked about the most.
Interesting, and I'm sure you experienced this. Have Talking to Guru Dan for an hour or two, it's like reading an encyclopedia. I mean, you will get, it's like when you do one of his classes, you will do so much, you will go through so much material in that class that you go, wow, what was the first thing we did?
Yep. You got to
But
record it.
but if you stick with it, one thing you do get from Guru, and if you really tap into him and reach out to him and he sees you're enthusiastic, he'll give you so much info and show you things that you just can't get through in classes.
Yeah.
And yeah, an amazing human being. So let's move on. So take us back. How do you get back into boxing? Where does it happen? Who does it happen with? And then now, all along when you're doing boxing at the start and when you're doing your martial arts, and obviously to be a second degree in Tang Sudo, you were clearly in there for at least probably what, 7 to 10 years. I'm
Yes.
yeah. Did you know about Cus on this time frame, or was that someone that, how did you first find out about Cus D'Amato?
Okay, so that's a good question. And before I get to that, I'll just step back one step because we missed a huge piece of my martial art experience. Was I studied Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, like the whole Takeda clan with Roy Goldberg. He had a student up in Buffalo, and I went to school in Buffalo for 4 years. So that's when I learned. I went from a Korean style to a Japanese style. And that was fascinating to me. And that was another half a decade. And that was amazing. Although there was a lot of things that were maybe not applicable to what I really loved, and I saw certain flaws in that with true self-defense. I loved the style, I loved the technique. And then Steven Seagal came out and started practicing Aikido, which was an offshoot of Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. So I started to really get fascinated with that. And I would say that was a big chunk when I was in Buffalo before I even heard about Cuss and Mike. But then I started, realizing that I wasn't going to make it in the arts. I was already past 18. I was in college at that time. And that's when I started to switch gears, really, and say, if I can't make it as a martial artist, how do I stay parallel with what I love? And I started the understanding the idea of exercise science and sports medicine. Once I got into that realm, I started to look at Olympians and the amateurs that were the best. And I saw Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson, I was like, who's his master? I thought of it from a martial arts standpoint, not like a boxing standpoint. I'm like, wow, this guy is on the scene and everybody's talking about him. Where did he come from? And then I started to there was no Google at that time. That's like looking through the newspaper articles or card catalogs of libraries in New York, and I saw the name Cuss, and it was always akin with Mike, and I had no idea what Cuss meant. I didn't know what they were talking about. I had no clue until I realized it meant Constantine. And that's really when I started to understand, I would say between maybe that 18, 19-year old, when I started to hear the name Cus. So it wasn't when I was boxing as a really, really young youth, nor was it when I heard about my uncle Sammy or when I was going through Tang Judo or Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. It was really after all that when I started to switch gears more towards sports medicine is when I heard about Cus and Mike.
Now, you so closer to the late night. Mike was already heavyweight champ at the time, or was this before and you were hearing about this up and coming, heavyweight prospect that could potentially be the youngest heavyweight of all time? Was it in that time period, or was Mike already a champion and now you're hearing about Cus because Mike's the champion?
It was before it because Mike was on the scene at the Olympics and he never made it to the Olympics.
1984.
So it was about that. So I was like 14, 15. I heard about Mike, but again, I never even started to research Cuss till years later after that, and when I started to get involved with the Olympics. So Mike came on the scene, but I didn't really start to research him till about that. So it was after the Olympics. So it was definitely before he became just about when he became a pro.
Right. So now you hear about Cus, you start to research him, you start to realize that Cus is short for Constantine. Take us from there. Are you just reading about him, or you just kind of hear about him, or you see old interviews of him, or is there what attracts you to him that leads to confusing the enemy, for example, years later?
Somebody at the Olympic Training Center mentioned to me that Cuss has a fighter for a style for a shorter fighter.
So hold on, let's go back a little bit. So at the Olympic Training Center, why were you at the Olympic Training Center? Where was this and when was this?
So this was my first bout was probably 1997
We're
or
talking about
8.
Taekwondo here, right?
No, this was when I was more sports medicine. I never was at the Olympic Training Center, nor did I get to the Olympic level as a Taekwondo practitioner. I never made it that far. This was before the trials. So I lost at nationals, Jim.
Okay. So then you're at the, just take us through how you're at the Olympic Center.
So years later, I guess I started, realizing I had to get involved with school. And, I wasn't gonna own a martial arts school, unfortunately, and I wasn't gonna win a gold medal. And when I lost, I just switched gears at that time. And in that exact time was 88-ish.
Okay.
And then at that time I switched gears to start to say, hey, I'm not going to make it as an athlete. I need to go to something parallel, like I mentioned earlier, and that's when I started the idea of exercise science and sports medicine. So far,
Okay. Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're listening. Go ahead.
from that point, that's when I started to realize I want to help Olympians. If I can't win a gold medal myself, I want to try to help them. So then I started to get involved with the team, and the first team I ever worked with was, again, 98. I think I was put with like volleyball, USA volleyball,
And what was your role in there?
a sports medicine physical therapist. So I've done my schooling up to that time, and I had enough credentials to become a volunteer at the United States Olympic Committee. And the USOC has 4 tiers. You start out working at the Olympic Training Center, and they appoint you. They tell you who you're going to work with. So I think it was volleyball my first year. And that's one year I was at Lake Placid. After that, you get a chance to go and work with a national team. I think the second year that national team I worked with ski and snowboard in Park City, Utah. After that, if you still are, so to say, in the club and you move forward, you get to represent Team USA sports medicine outside of the country. I worked at the Pan Am Games in 2003. After 2003, working with the US sailing team, then from there, I was in 2004 working with USA Boxing. And that's when I met Dirrell, Andre Ward, and that whole crew. That and then from there, I stayed with U.S. Sailing for years, worked with USA Fencing, triathlon, um, wrestling, and then I got so involved with the sports medicine aspect when I realized I couldn't really do it as an athlete.
Now, with all
What
the
year
different,
was the Taekwondo again?
My Taekwondo peak was the early 80s.
No, I mean when you worked with that team.
The Lopez team
Yeah, yeah.
was after Sydney, so
2000?
that must have been oh two, three, four, five. Like the picture that I'll send to you was, I think, all of us mustering up at closing ceremonies,
Okay.
and
Cool.
that was after I trained with them. They invited me to every practice, basically. So I went to every practice with them in those early 2000s.
So were you at the Olympic Training Center or were you in Sugar Land, Texas?
Never went to Sugarland. I met them at the Olympics.
Okay. Okay. Got you.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah, I
you.
met them at the Olympics. I knew of them before because I knew
Yeah.
of the family, but I never met them. And then since I, I explained to them, hey, I was in Taekwondo. I never, got to the Olympics. They were like, hey, come train with us. So
That's
I
all.
would sneak away from my duties at sports medicine and run to train with the Lopez family.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, we're
so
gonna get Gene back on again. We'll tell him that we just had you. Because we're gonna do one episode just with Gene, because I think his story's crazy, man. He could write a book. He
I'm
truly could write a
sure.
book.
I have, and I'll send another picture. I have a uniform, um, like a traditional Taekwondo uniform from the Olympics at, I think it was 2004. Gene signed it, Steve
Oh, that's
signed it.
awesome.
It's beautiful, and I keep it in one of the rooms, and it's something that I'm proud of because people are like, wow, if you could work with this guy, then you should be able to fix my elbow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
so let's back up a little bit, Doc. So you start to hear about Cus, then all of a sudden you start to hear that Cus has this style that suits the shorter fighter. Take us back to that point. What happens from there?
So then I said to myself, there are about three people in the world that I always emulated and loved. And as we all do, I emulated and loved Bruce Lee. I think we all know about, all of his movies. And as a youth, that was influential. We skipped over that, but that was a big piece in the time. I know it's hard to put all the time together properly, but I know we all went through that. But after Bruce, I loved Houdini because I'm part of the American Society of Magicians since I've been about 13. And I used to do weddings, bar mitzvahs, grand openings of restaurants, and I do close-up magic. So Houdini was somebody fascinating. And the third person, was Cuss. And I knew there was tons of stuff written about Bruce. I knew there were tons of stuff written about Houdini. And I couldn't find anything written about Cuss. And I found the lane. I found an angle. And I was like, why am I just reading clippings of Sports Illustrated and ESPN? And I'm asking my dad, who was in NBC for 50 years, hey, can I go get your Betamaxes? And would those guys let me in NBC so I can pull all the clippings of Howard Cosell and research all that? And I was doing a compilation as I was doing like a master's thesis.
That's awesome.
And I realized I collected more information, more memorabilia. I did more interviews, something like 88 and 89 interviews, from mob people to family members, boxers. And then I think I compiled such a mass of stuff that not only my ex-wife at the time, but friends were like, what are you going to do with this, Scotty? Yo, Scotty, you did this is great, but what are you going to do, bro? And I didn't know. But I knew that I had more information than anybody. And then I remember when I was at the Olympics in 2008, there was a woman there who was going to write Michael Phelps's book. And she was there to talk to Michael Phelps. And, me being the sports medicine guy standing on the sidelines, I was like, yeah, tell me more about what you're doing with him. And hey, could you help me? I wrote some stuff and I did a lot of research and I would love to write a book on some old boxing trainer. Can you put me in the right direction and help me edit it? And she's like, sure, we can talk. I'm working with a couple of other Olympians. Sure, just give me your info. So after the Beijing games were open, I basically took a lump of stuff and dumped it on her desk in Boston. I was like, help me put this together. And she's like, this is fucking amazing. She's
Yeah.
like, there's nothing written about this guy. He's so swarthy. He's so sneaky. No one really could tell you anything. Nobody was really around him enough to commit to anything. But you've compiled a massive info. Let's see what we can do with this. And that really began me kind of throwing my elbows out and looking around if there were any footprints in this space, Jim.
That's awesome.
And is that what led to confusing the enemy?
Well, the words confusing the enemy, there was a guy named Gay Talese who I interviewed. He didn't want to talk. He told me not to put it on the record. He was very kind of a confusing guy, but he also mentioned the words confusing the enemy. He, I think, wrote an article in the 50s about cuss and used that terminology, and I kind of stole it for the book name.
But
Good.
did your writings end up in your book, or is this what your book is compiled of some of this research you had done, or is
Oh,
that
totally. Yeah, Gate Talese's info is in there. Like the stuff about Cuss and Floyd and how they played footsie, and how Cuss used to take his bed and block it against the doors at hotel rooms, and how blacks weren't allowed to walk through the front door in the South, and how Cuss and Floyd used to have to go sleep in like the servants' quarters. Yeah, all that was part of this.
well, Cus was a very paranoid individual. He was very was he paranoid or just scared? Because when he would go into his bedroom, legend has it that he would look under the bed every time he went into his bed, like somebody was under the bed or something like that. I mean, that was probably all part of his genius.
I wouldn't say it was part of his genius, it was part of his reality, Jim. He really at one point thought the mob was going to come after him. And at
Because of
one
his early
point,
days in boxing, right?
say it again?
Because of his early days in boxing.
Of course.
It's
Yeah.
interesting you bring that up because have you seen this?
The IBC. Yes.
This is the 1954. Have you seen this particular edition? Well,
Not in a long time, but I
in
do remember I've seen that.
in here is Cuss. It's a little article on Cuss and boxing.
Yes, I haven't read it in
Yeah.
over 13, 14 years.
It says Floyd Patterson's manager Cus D'Amato has trouble with the IBC. Did some of these things lead to this sort of genuine
Yes.
fear
This
of God,
paranoia.
this
Yep.
paranoia? And why was that? Like, I mean, Cus wanted to train fighters. Cus was a genius at that. He had no, I don't believe Cus D'Amato was an individual that had an ulterior motive. I think he just wanted to be in a gym training. Who look at he did it. Floyd Patterson was the youngest heavyweight champion. Jose Torres was the first Latin light heavyweight champion. Am I correct with that?
Yes, and but he trained so many other people in so many other amazing walks of life that just can't be forgotten as well. And he created so many other champions in life, but you're correct by saying those the stats that you just said were right.
And then Mike Tyson, the youngest heavyweight, and I challenged that record to be broken at 20.
I
So
agree. And Buster Mathis, I got to stick in there because when Cuss left New York and went to Rhinebeck, he really put his new mind and efforts into training Buster Mathis.
let's go back a little bit. So let's go back as far back as we can go. So let's start at the start with Cus D'Amato. How far back can you take us and kind of give so the audience have an overview of who this man was? Like you said, he did most people, if you say Cus D'Amato today, a lot of people, probably most people will go, oh, Mike Tyson's trainer. People that know who that is. But like you just said, there's a lot more to him. There's a lot more to him outside of boxing.
Yep. So you got to go back to 1908, and that's where I started with the book. 1908 was the year he was born, and when you understand New York at that time, you understand a kid at that time. They didn't play chicken with trains. They played chicken with horse and buggies. That was a different mindset in the streets of New York. So coming up in the streets of New York at that time, he was born here while Rocco was the only brother born in Italy. But when Damiano and his mom came over, Cus, Tony, um, Nick, and Jerry were all born here. And they were running around New York in the early 1900s before the Depression. That's when boxing and alcohol was prominent. Excuse me. I hate to say, whorehouses were still rampant all over New York. Um, the first Madison Square Garden was built down on 23rd Street. That and Cuss was in the Lower East Side at that time with his gym, but yet he was born up in the Bronx at Classen Point. And not too long ago, when we had the anniversary of Cuss's death, I took Tom Patty, Frankie Minicelli, up to where, Cuss was born and the area on 149th and Southern Boulevard. So they got the idea, but you can't really tell what it was like, back in the day. My mindset of old New York can bring me back there, hearing like the hoofs and people selling fruit on the carts and people fighting in the streets, but it's a very different chunk of life at this time. But that's where he was born, but raised downtown for the most part, Jim. So just to get you back, I know I like how you appreciate the timeline. That was really from 1908 being born to maybe 1920, and Cuss was very into the priesthood at that time. He didn't even really understand boxing, but wrestling was big in the family. They had an uncle that used to come over and almost like in the basement of their home set up like shoelaces to make a makeshift ring, and they would wrestle and all the boys would fight. But that's what was going on at that time in Cuss's life in the early 1900s.
So, have you ever discovered, like, what made him view boxing the way he viewed it? Like he said, boxing's 80% mental. He said fear is either your friend or your enemy. If fear can help you, or if you can control it, it helps you. If you let it control you, it'll destroy you and everything around you. Like, where did all this come from? And the creation of the Willie. I was just looking at old footage of him recently with the first Willie he had, where it was that old black and white footage, and he has, I think, a number 7 written. It's a little small, like just like a pad covered with like a potato sack on the wall.
That's from a Japanese filmmaker. I could tell you about how that was created, but you really asked a deep question, like where did the sensitivity to boxing come from? Why wouldn't you be like everybody else? Suck it up, power barrel through, fight. Like why wasn't he like that? I think Cuss had a different sensitivity and awareness with people. And it wasn't all push, fight, and destroy. Although that's what it became in a way with bad intentions, I think Cuss had a natural sensitivity to human beings. And he really was sensitive about the psychology of people. And when you apply that to what was the most important thing in New York at that time, which was boxing, and that sport was the hugest, I think Cuss kind of fused the two, his sensitivity of people and to what was going on and what people loved at the time. But it really, like where it came from, that mentality, was his sensitivity to people.
He really knew how the mind worked and the importance of it.
I think not the way we're looking at it now, but that sensitivity to people and understanding what people feel before, during, and after was not a thought by all the boxers, the boxing trainers. They only thought what was going on in the ring. Cuss really had amazing macro view. And when you say where did it come from, it's really hard to pinpoint that. And for me to be somebody that tells you exactly would be hard. And it would be almost wrong for me to tell you exactly. But I just know he had a sensitivity of people. He wanted to get to know you before you did anything physical. Before he worked with any fighter, Cuss would want to chat with you. And if he didn't like the way you chatted and he didn't like the way what you said, you're done. Like he worked with Joe Louis. I don't know if people know that. Not Joe Louis, the Bronx bomber, but Joe Louis, the martial artist.
Yeah. Joe Louis, the martial artist, was a friend of mine. We were good friends. We used to train together.
So I'm sure you probably have, hit him up on his Cuss. Cuss almost had him up in the Catskills. I think it was Ring Magazine or ESPN almost paid Cuss to have Joe come up because Cuss was dying to have a new heavyweight champion or to have a champion, and he thought, besides Ed Too Tall Jones and Wilt Chamberlain and Jimmy Jacobs, he was trying to make everybody a champ, and one was Joe Louis.
Now, at what time period was he trying to make Joe Louis a champion?
I love that you asked the time periods, man. 66,
Oh,
67.
so
I feel like I'm on a game show. 66, 67. About
right.
that time.
So right back when Joe Louis was winning, Zach, as we talked to when we talked with Tom Bleeker and Chuck and Ben
Chuck,
Taki with Ed Parker, the international karate champions, right basically when Joe was at
right around there.
yeah,
Yeah.
right
Yeah,
around.
because Cuss used to scout people. He went to the 88 Olympics in Mexico. He went to Rome in 1960. He was scouting the Olympians. So I'm sure he saw them.
Did Cus actually work with Joe Louis, or was it just talk? Did they actually get to work together?
They talked. But again, that's what I guess that was my point. They never did anything physical, Jim. They
Did they?
only talked, and Cuss said he wasn't in it. I think he said, again, the quote was, I don't think he has the will to fight anymore. And and Cus D'Amato thinks that, he ain't fucking working with you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that's it, it's over. But
Well,
Cuss
Joe
always would talk to them first.
and Joe was trying to propel into movies at that point. He had done some movies and so on and so forth. So his mind was probably there.
I think you're right about that. I think you might be right. And that's a good surmise, because I mean, I love Joe Louis. When he had that red, white, and blue, uniform on, and I used to see him and those old guys, the Budweiser karate team and Billy Blanks even, before he went, I mean, those guys were my idols. I'm sure they
Yeah.
were yours too, Jim.
Yeah.
I know them all.
That's amazing. I
I
mean,
know the amazing thing, a little off the beaten track. Billy Blanks fought in the International Karate Championships. They were in Pasadena this year in August. Keep in mind, he's 70. He's 70. He has a gym at his house. He's training all his students at his house. He's sparring everybody. Anybody that turns up, he'll spar with. And he went out, and you remember he had the famous cartwheel kick?
of course,
He did it. He just did it in this past August.
amazing.
Amazing. I mean, he's 70 and he went out and he defeated this guy. He had one fight. It was one fight. But he defeated this guy. But when you sit and talk with him, I don't know if you've ever met him, he has the vigor of a 20-year-old.
I have not. I have not.
The vigor of a 20. His energy's that of a 20-year-old. His physique is that of a 20-year-old. He's a big guy. I mean, he's probably about 6'1".
And that's the presence we're talking about. That's that
Yeah.
other energy we were talking about. Like when someone walked into a room, that's special, man. He's got that. And I remember in the basement of my parents' house trying to do that cartwheel kick. And remember trying to do it from the left side and the right side, and was only able to do it on one side. And I remember being so pissed. And do you remember? Then I switched over for a while from kumite to forms.
Uh,
Do you remember Keith Hirabayashi?
I know him very well.
Dude, you're sick. That's amazing how many people you know.
It was
James knows everybody, man.
I
It's
was
crazy.
just looking at old footage of him. I could show you stuff here.
I know, I know you probably do,
This
but
is this is 1/8. I can't find it right now, but I have a hard drive here that is 20 terabytes of martial arts and so on. I was just watching him in the Bermuda what was it? The Bermuda the championship, the Bermuda Internationals,
internationals, yes,
the Bermuda Internationals, and everybody fought in that. Billy Blanks,
yes.
George Chung is on there, but Keith Hirabayashi, and of course, he appeared in China O'Brien 1 and 2. That was his first. And those kicks, everything you see him do, nothing's under cranked. That's him.
Yeah.
That
No,
is him. And he just did a movie, Cynthia's new movie called Fire Creek, I think it's called. And he's in that.
Black Creek, or
There's a
Black
Black Creek
Yeah.
or something like that. He just did that, and they shot that about 2 years ago, and he does spinning back kicks in there. I was just speaking with him not so long ago. He's in terrific shape, and he's just he's one of those rare martial artists. I mean, he could do it all.
Technique was just phenomenal. That's when I remember being like, you have to be perfect with your technique. When I saw him, and just the way he used to start with his fist up so high, I just he actually spawned me. I think this was 1986 or 7, where there was a huge S. Henry Cho tournament at the Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden, and I mimicked a lot of moves he did in a form and won first place in a form at the Felt Forum in like that mid 80s time. And I really internally know it was because of Keith Hirabayashi.
That tells you how good he was. You won
Yeah.
mimicking him. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing, the Black Belt Hall of Fame Awards were on in October 24. And my instructor from Ireland was here for them and so on. John Sepulveda, my instructor's instructor, and by default, my instructor was being inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame. As we know, Black Belt now is now owned by George Chung. And it was very kind of George to give me the invitation to go there and everything. So I was there, and I'm talking with Cynthia Richard Norton, rest in peace, Richard, and Keith Hirabayashi. And I said, you know what? We need to do a China O'Brien 3. And everybody looked and said, you know what? We do.
Yeah, it's funny.
And that interesting, Richard just passed away in this past March.
Yeah.
So, that was just in October. It was 5 months later. And, it's just a little side note, like how precious life is. But let's get back to you, Doc. So let's go back to the Willie about the Cus.
Perfect.
How did the Willie come about?
Yeah. I'll give you some insight. Well, first off, the Willie was not named by Cus, Jose, or anybody. It was named by Ramona Torres. So they were at a press conference, and
Let's go back. Who was Ramona Torres?
Jose's wife,
Got it.
and they were all doing a movie um, for Jose by a Japanese guy. And it's funny because I'll remember his name in a second, but the Japanese guy, um, his intern was Yoko Ono. And I couldn't believe, I remember bugging out to that fact at the time. But they were doing this movie. It was a two-part movie. Let me just tell you exactly. Give me 1 second, I'll tell you guys the name. Um,
The actual footage I was talking about earlier that
I
I
know exactly. I found the movie. I put it online for everybody. I dug it up. Um, and it's called, where is it? Ah, so it was Hiroshi Tashigihara in 1964-5 ended up doing a bit on Jose through the Bronx, his Puerto Rican heritage, and that's when they unveiled the Willie to the public.
so that's that black and white footage I was referring to earlier.
Yes, I had that in 8 millimeters, and I transferred that over to CD myself, and I put that up on YouTube, and now I'm sure other people kind of, did whatever they wanted with it. But Tashigi Hara, and again, what was cool is when you look at that whole movie, there's a Japanese lady that runs around, and that's Yoko Ono, which was really cool. So if you look at those two parts that are up in full, you'll see her up there. So Tashigihara does this video on Jose. They stay side by side with Jose through his training up to Willie Pastrano fight. And again, the dates in that 60s, late 60s time that they're doing it for Jose Pastrano. He's training for Jose. They followed him up the whole time. I forget that might have been in the Gramercy gym where you see the mattresses wrapped around the telephone of the one of the heating poles. And that's was the unveiling of the Willie. That's what was not where it was created, but that was really just showing the public what the Willie bag was. And then
Well,
what happened was, as a newscaster said, "Cuss, what is the name of this?" He called it the apparatus. He's like, my apparatus can make fighters punch 6 times in 2/5 of a second. And that's what my apparatus is. And Ramona sitting on a couch says, "That's Willie." Meaning like that's what he's gonna do to Willie, she meant. So then the not the staff but the people around there were like, "Oh, let's call it the Willie." And that's where the Willie came from. It was the newscasters was the word. All the press called it the Willie, and that's how it became named as the Willie after Willie Pastrano.
Wow.
Got it. That's a very now. Where was it create? Where was that Willie created and built? You said that's where it was shown for the first time. Did so? Cus had this design for this bag with these numbers, and as we know, each number that he had, the standard generic boxing was one was a jab and two was a right cross. Well, Cus changed up. Seven's a jab, two's a right cross, and one's a hook. And wasn't his philosophy? I'm going to call out the numbers because before the opposite corner, the opponent's corner realize what we're doing and what number represents each punch, we're 2 to 3 rounds in, which gives us an advantage.
Yes, 100%. That is exactly what Cuss thought, and that's one of the reasons of the genesis of the numbers. Instead of being like 1 2 1 2, he would be able to say 7 7 5, and absolutely what you said was correct. So that was kind of the impetus of the numbers. But he was living with Jimmy Jacobs on I think 57th Street and 7th Avenue. They lived together, and Cuss, in the middle of his sleep, imagined the Willie. He imagined something wrapped around the pole with certain numbers that he can call out. And he remembers working with a pianist, a guy that played the piano well, a German guy. I forget his name exactly. I know it's in the book. He was really a Jewish guy that pretended he was German. A long story with that guy, but he was a pianist. And Cuss used to love how people could play so many different things with the piano with just one statement. He used to say, B minor and blah, 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 and people used to be able to. So he loved that. He also studied jockeys. He was very into horse trainers, and where the jockey hit the horse became the numbers. Meaning, if he hits the jockey up near the neck on one side, up near the neck on the other side, on the back right, the back left, it would make the horse do different things. So with the pianists, with that piano player, with the jockeys, he liked the idea of people that could do you could throw those things up in the air and pull, and those fast shooters. He liked how they didn't have to think. They just acted. And all that amalgamated into the idea of the Willie and the numbers.
Kind of relates to what Bruce Lee used to say. You have to be like water, and everybody, he had that saying where you pour water in a cup becomes the cup, you pour it in a jar becomes the jar. Another statement he made to Pat Strong. Do you know Pat Strong? He was a Seattle student of Bruce Lee. Bruce used to say, water doesn't have a brain. If you have 20 holes in a wall and it's pouring through, it'll pour through all 20. It doesn't think and stop and think and say, okay, we got to go through. If you have 1,000 holes in the wall, it goes through. So basically it just goes without thinking. It's like non-intention. It just operates.
I think that had to be the latter end of the peekaboo where you could be relaxed. And that's what Cuss used to be like, when you're relaxed, that's when you can see. You could see a twitch on a shoulder, but that I think came after when your skill was so ingrained and the Willie helped train that nonstop repetition. That's when you can have that feeling of bad intentions because you knew you could put yourself in a position where you won't be hit, but you could throw your punch with the utmost bad intentions because you knew you weren't going to get hit. That's where it all came from, Jim. I think that developed later. That confidence and flow like water was like once you know your shit, you can let it flow. I think that was kind of the later consciousness of that.
Now, I've been told that the 8 was not on the Willie bag because the 8 was a secret. What's your info on that? Is that
the 8 is on the Willie. That's it.
Right. I was told at one point you don't put the 8 on the Willie because it's a secret number. I was thinking, well, once you call it out 3 times and there's 10 people in the room, it's no longer a secret number. Is there did any of that come from Cuss, or is that just an individual's perspective on something?
The eight, from what I heard, which was bits and pieces of people, that it came from the jab. So to get out of the way of a really long, stiff jab. Yes, thank you. You got it. That's it. That's it. We can, again, like we talked about earlier today, you can take that and run for the fences. But it was really just because you would be maintaining your lower body in the same position. So you would maintain your closeness, or you would have the gap closed with your legs almost like a side horse stance. The
Yes,
hand is up. You're here. You see the punch over you. And then when you come up, you have the beautiful block and then hit right after. That's it.
that's what Cus did in the footage with Muhammad Ali, where he clipped Ali in the lip.
That's it. You got it. That's exactly where and we can run with it, but that's what the eight was, is how to maintain your footing, how to stay in the same spot, but get your spear in the chest.
But the important part of it was too, was that when you throw it, it's inverted, and your head is protected by your shoulder, so it's
Thank
not
you.
hit.
Thank you.
And then you come over the top with the overhand too, and spring forward, switch leads, and what on. So
100%.
let's go to Cus's first champion, Floyd Patterson. How does that come about? How does he become the coach of Floyd Patterson? How did they meet? What went on there?
Cuss worked with his older brother. Simple as that. He worked with his older brother. He loved training his older brother, but then he had an affinity to this young kid who just started listening to him more, was a little quieter, was maybe a little more hard to figure out. He had to get through more levels. Um, and that's what Cuss loved, is kind of breaking down all your shells to get to your core and then build you up from the ground level. And that's what he did. Like Angelo and Dundee used to get people way after their core was made. Cuss would love building your core. So that's how we started with Floyd, by working with his brother. And, I think his brother name was Frank, if I'm not mistaken. But Floyd used to, pick his brother up or come to the gym, if I'm not mistaken. And that was the Gramercy on 14th. And that's how it all started with Floyd. And Cuss just took an affinity to him.
Now, why do you think when Floyd Patterson fought Muhammad Ali that everything he did didn't work against
That,
Ali? Was it because Floyd? Okay, well, we'll get to it later about Mike, and I have my opinions on it, and I've talked to hundreds of people who have their opinions, and you'll have your opinion. I think it would have been much different with Mike fighting Ali opposed to Floyd. But why do you think it didn't work against Ali? Was it Floyd wasn't able to pull it off, or was Ali just that good?
I think Ali was just that good.
Yeah.
I think, he just had the ability to just get into your mind like nobody. Again, that's that other sense we're talking about. He just had, again, in, out of the ring, he just had this prowess that was just so hard to overcome.
He
You
was
know,
just in his head. I think a lot of it was that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and Floyd didn't do bad. I also think that, Floyd was just out-willed, you know, and then after he was out-willed, he just became outskilled, and then it just fell apart. And it's not the style that fell apart. We all know it's the person that falls apart. You know what I mean? And I still love Floyd, and I love the way Jose did the peekaboo. I love the way Mike did the peekaboo. But again, it really depends on the timing, what goes on around the fight, what's going on. There's so much that goes on before you get
So
in the
many
ring.
variables. Yeah. When it comes to a fight.
Exactly. So it's really hard to say why. It's not that it didn't work. I wouldn't think of it like that. I just think when two fighters come together, there's a lot more than just the physicality of it. And
Yeah.
Ali was just so controlling of so many people. I mean, talking to fighters, there was no such thing as talking, before Ali. He would chatter made him relaxed. He told us that. Like, okay, even if he was getting beat up, is that all you got, George? Is that all you got? That was him being stressed out. But he used, like the way you might use a key op to get energy out. Muhammad Ali used chatter.
Yeah.
Self-talk.
Yeah, self-talk, internal dialogue.
Yep.
So he was just at such a high level, but I wouldn't say that it didn't work. He just couldn't he couldn't get it. You know, you can't sometimes, and you know this against competition. Some days I just couldn't find my step, and
Well, I
I
was
used to make
referring.
excuses about that. I used to make myself, excuses in my own head. But some days I just wasn't on.
Well,
That is
yeah, I was referring to not the style not working, but how comes just on that day, I guess Floyd couldn't make it work against Ali. Not the style itself didn't work. I was referring to Floyd.
right.
So
Yeah, I think maybe if you did 5 fights, I think that Floyd would might be victorious a couple of them.
yeah,
But Ali was just a different person, you
Different
know.
animal.
talk to us a little bit about Burt Young. Of course, the famous Paulie from Rocky. Most people
Yeah.
don't know that he was a boxer under Cus.